My name is Della Phillips. I'm an artist as well as I'm known as the Bicycle Lady. How are you doing today? I'm doing great. Now, from what you can see on my table, I do have some watercolor paper I just got in, along with an envelope with some Winsor Newton watercolor paper samples. And thank you very much, Winsor Newton. I really appreciate it. Also, I have the brush which I'm going to be using to do the blending testing on the various watercolors. So without any further delay, let's get to testing. I have the package of Winsor Newton sent to me with the paper samples. I wanted to show them to you. Now I did get into this prior to this, but I still wanted to show you the paper samples at Winsor Newton. I did request only the watercolor, professional, both hot press and cold press, and that's what they sent me. But the surprise was they sent me pages that were like 7.5 to 8 inches by 11. And I got 3 of each. Now you saw the 2 in the front that were a little shorter. I did cut off strips for the marker testing that we're going to be doing shortly on the paper. But thank you very much, Winsor Newton. Next, I did purchase this myself. I splurged. I liked how the cold press really surprised me and how wonderful it was to blend on. So I was hoping that the hot press would be equally as wonderful to work on. We'll find out. So I went ahead and marked the test area. I'm saving a little bit of an area there to do a little sketch on. And if it doesn't work out, that's no big deal. I can use it for other things. It's beautiful to work with. Either way, hopefully it will work well with the markers. We'll find out. Now, what I'm blending here, of course, is the Faber Castell Scarlet Red Deep. And it pretty much blended everything out. Might be a little hint, but I'll see better once it dries. Now here's the sepia with the Winsor Newton. Of course, that's infamous for being difficult to blend out. Where that's not really blending out that much. I did my best. Back in and tried even further. It still is a faint line. It won't totally blend out from where the color is applied directly to the paper. So that was disappointing. Now let's try the Prussian blue. Again, there's a lot of blending that's going on, but it's not totally blending out. There is, you can still see application lines. Now the next color, as usual, in this testing series, is the Cadmium Red from Winsor Newton. And you see the blending here. There you can really see some lines left. It's even more prominent. So maybe I could have blended it a little bit more, but it's evident that the application lines where you apply the color directly to the page is going to show. The rows actually blend out fairly well, which normally is moderately difficult. And then here's the Hooker Green Deep, and we're blending that out as well. And lines are left. We'll see that later once it's dry. Okay. Final one is going to be the Faber-Castell Cold Gray 6. I am still putting the lines to the side. I'm going to let this go for 15 minutes, dry and so forth, and sit, and then see how much will blend out if we go back in and try to blend. I'll stay consistent even though this appears like not a paper that I would use with applying the marker directly to the paper and blending it out type technique. Next is the Fabriano Artistico Hot Press. Saw how wonderful the cold press was in a prior video, so I finally got rounded up a sample of it from a friend. So let's test this out. First up, of course, as usual, per testing procedure, is going to be the Faber-Castell Scarlet Red Deep. And this is blending out well. You may have to use just a little bit more of a blending, not very much, just slight, maybe more, than what you did on the cold press. Now let's see what happens to the sepia. This is the real telltale sign. Well, it looks pretty good so far. Yeah, it does blend totally out. It takes a little bit more of the blending than what happened with the cold press, but it will totally blend out and not leave any lines whatsoever. And we'll see that when it's dry. Now here for the Prussian blue. Again, it's blending out. Looks like there may be a hint of a line, but that could be just because of where I applied it. But when I went back in and touched it, you can see that corner, it's totally blended out. Now here is the cadmium red from Winsor Newton. And you can see it readily. It's known as not that difficult to blend out most papers, and it totally blended out here with no problem. Just a couple swipes or so. Now here's the rose, which is moderately. And you can see there, the lines are just totally disappearing. It totally blends out. So this paper is wonderful. Plus it's hot press. It has a slight hint of a velvet texture. And it would be very easy on your markers, being that it doesn't have a cold press texture. This is really nice. And it's blending out like the cold press. So this is fantastic. Definitely, just from this testing alone, I would say this is one of the top papers to select to use with the watercolor markers using this type of technique. Or you want the option to use this type of technique, I should say. Now, for the next papers, let's take a look at the Winsor Newton paper. I really have high hopes and I'm rooting for the Winsor Newton since they were so generous with their samples, but let's do some honest testing here. And now we put down the the Albrecht Durer Scarlet Red Deep from Faber Castell. Well, it's leaving application lines. It's not totally blending out. The Sepia. Now, as I say, I'm remaining consistent with the testing, putting the line to the side. As you can see, a little blended, but it left pretty heavy application lines. So my hopes were dashed. And Winsor Newton, I hope you don't mind with the honest results. I don't think you are. I think you would prefer it for the type of quality of products you bring out, and then my impression of the quality of the company as well. As it stands, the hot press, every color so far has left an application line. Possibly the Faber Castell Scarlet Red Deep might have totally blended out, but it looks like there may be a hint. Better tell once it dries. Cadmium Red surprised me. They did definitely leave some fairly dark application lines. That's usually a little easier to blend on most papers. And now here comes the rose. And you do see some blending, but there's still very definite lines of application of the color that will not blend out. So with everything and the sepia, I'm going to go ahead and finish testing, but this is not a paper I would use if I want to be able to use the direct application of color and blending out with the watercolor markers. Color, that was Hooker's Green from Winsor Newton. Now the last color is the Faber Castell Albrecht Durer Cold Gray 6. And it's definitely not blending out, so definitely not a paper to use with the direct application of color to blend out totally. Well, let's take a look at the Winsor Newton cold press. Maybe it will be different like the other brands have been. Alright, here's the Faber Castell Scarlet Red Deep. It does blend out more than the hot press, possibly totally blending out. We're better able to tell that once it dries. It does take a fair amount of blending though. Next up is the infamous sepia. Let's see what it does. It does blend out a lot. And much better than with the hot press. However, it still leaves application lines. Where you work on it a lot, it doesn't leave a whole lot, but it still leaves application lines. Darn. Well, I had high hopes for it. Now here is the Prussian blue. Now the texture on the Winsor Newton Professional Cold Press is like a medium cold press type paper. It's not as rough as the Arch, nor as fine as the Strathmore. Again, when you blend that out, there is a hint of application lines on the Prussian blue. Now we're doing the Cadmium red from Winsor Newton. In many ways, if I remember correctly, when I did the testing with the Sanders Waterford paper, cold press, you had some similar type of results, or way it blended out. See, all these papers really high quality papers. It's just, are they the best thing for this type of use or technique? So that's the reason why I started this whole thing, is so I could find it, because I wanted to use the markers, not be frustrated by that. So in this situation, with as many application lines showing through on this, I would say both the Winsor Newton Professional watercolor papers are a do not use for this type of technique of applying the color directly from the marker onto the paper and wanting to blend it out totally. Now you could still use the other two techniques where you could put the color down on like a plastic sheet or palette, and then pick it up with a brush and put it to the paper. Would work just fine with that. Or you can take the color off the tip and then onto the brush, and then have the brush apply the color to the paper. I want to do the direct application method as one of my options, and probably more used options. Now we're looking at the Lana Aquarelle. It's been 15 minutes. I'm seeing how much that line to the side that I put will go back in solution. And this actually almost went totally back in solution. Just a faint line. And you can see pretty much, it's not totally dry, but pretty much there's no application lines left, which is great. Although, I take that back. There looks like maybe possibly some faint lines on the Sepia and the Hooker's Green. Not so sure about the Scarlet Red deep up the top. That could have been me not blending it out as much. So we'll see what it looks like when it dries. So I would say this is a marginal fail or do not use for this type of direct marker technique, because it would depend upon what colors you would use with this paper. But since there's so many other good options where you don't have to worry about what colors you use, I would put this in the do not use for this type of watercolor marker technique. Okay, next is the Faber-Castell, not Faber-Castell, but Fabriano Artistico, and that really almost totally blended out. Just a very, very, very hint line left. The Sepia blended out some, not a whole lot. Now the Prussian blue does blend out quite a bit, but you still have a main application line. And as I said in the past, that could be useful using a different type of technique. So that's good. The rose pretty much almost blended totally out, not quite. And now here's the Hooker's Green. It does blend out quite a bit. And you know, there's still a line. Like I said, this can lend itself to a different type of technique. Now, here is the Winsor Newtons. I'm doing this even though I know it's a do not use, just to remain consistent. And let's see what happens. It's kind of fun to see all the results, no matter what. At least that's from my point of view. And you can see some blended, like the Cadmium red and the Prussian blue. But for the most part, it's just not that much blending out, and the sepia didn't blend at all. So, not totally surprised because of the prior results obtained. And here's the other Winsor Newton, the cold press. Let's see how it handles things. There's a little bit more blending, but not much. The Sepia pretty much has just a bare hint of a blend in this one. Almost no blend. Prussian blue is about the same as before on the other paper of Winsor Newton. As I said, this is definitely a no use for this type of technique with the watercolor markers. I hope you found this informative or educational or entertaining. If so, please click the thumbs up button and subscribe. I really would appreciate it. Next time I'm going to be doing the final video, which will be a summary video, reviewing all the results obtained from all the testing of the prior videos. So it's all in one place. Until next time, you have a great day.